Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Checked In with Splash. It's your girl Camille. I am so excited to be here for another episode. Today we are addressing a very common elephant in the room: why it's so dang hard for brands to do more events. So I'm joined today by Zach Napolitano. He is our director of product marketing, and he recently hosted a webinar digging into this very question and demystifying the solutions. So for today's conversation, we're going to unpack what's actually stopping businesses from doing more events. What's the untapped potential, right? What are they missing out on because of the problem? And of course, how the right event technology can provide real, tangible solutions and outcomes. So, Zach, hi. Thanks so much for joining me today. I'm thrilled, super, super thrilled that you're here to talk through this major pain point that we hear about so very often. Um, I want to get right into it and make the most of our time. So, let's get into our first question, Zach. From your
Okay.
perspective, and also what we've been hearing in the market, what's actually stopping businesses from doing more events? Let's get into the nitty gritty here.
Well, thanks for having me, Camille. It's great to be part of
Of
the
course.
CAM fam.
Always.
So I'm going to take it back a step and I'm going to tell you about something that's been on top of my mind about 2 months now. I can't stop thinking about it. You know it because you also worked on our Outlook of Events report that's coming out soon. It's a stat
Yep.
that says, when this is from hundreds of event marketers we polled, 81% said they would hold more events if they had technology that made events easier to replicate. So
That's
there's
a
a lot.
huge, huge
It's
number.
crazy, crazy, right? And with
81%?
this,
Are you for real? Sheesh.
yeah. So the one thing I like about this stat, and there's only one thing, is we're no longer trying to convince people that events are important. I think it's implied
Hmm.
here. It's not a matter of should we do events. It's like, how do I do more events? Like a lot more and
Yes.
now. All right. So I like that part, but it ends there. What I
Love it.
hate about this number and why I hate this stat so much is it's saying that 8 out of 10 event marketers know exactly what they need to do to hit their goal,
Hmm.
probably do another event or two, and they are blocked from doing it because why? Because their process is so inefficient, for lack of a better term. Um, and the way we've been analogizing that at Splash is, I mean, we've had to use mythological terms here. We use the story, the Greek story of Sisyphus, hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly, who
You
is
are. You nailed
condemned
it.
to, thank you, who's condemned to rolling a rock up the top of a mountain. And that's what it's like to do one event sometimes, right? You are
Yes.
responsible for strategy, internal coordination, all the digital assets, email, website, social, cost, content, execution, promotion, getting the right people in the room, the logistics, the follow up, proving it was worth it, then mustering the strength to do that trek again, right? So the metaphor, if you don't have the right tools, I think, is very, very relatable. It could be
So
demoralizing,
relatable. Yeah.
and that's just one event, right? Like where
Right.
we are at Splash, our mission is empowering people to democratize events and do
Hmm.
their entire event program and really be ambitious about growing their business through events. Hard to do though, if it's like rolling a boulder up a hill just to do a single event.
Exactly. Exactly. So, so Zach, what? Let's just paint this picture a little clearer. Like,
Yeah.
how when you think about, how much time are these 8 out of 10 marketers pushing that boulder up a hill? How much of an investment time wise is that for them?
Yeah. So we have another stat from our Outlook of Events report. Um, it says, don't quote me on this. Actually, you can quote me. I remember 51% spend like up to 39 hours per event on creating, planning, and hosting the event, right? So there's a lot to unpack there too. And I
Hmm.
tried to illustrate this in the webinar in the demo scenario I set up that gets into all of the logistics one has to navigate just to get a single event launched. And I'm sure we'll also, you asked me at the beginning, like, why is this the case? I think
Yeah.
are four fundamental problems that event people encounter. And the first, as it relates to this, like how much time does it take? For maybe
Mhm.
40 hours for an event, which takes somebody out of their role for a week to do an event,
Mhm.
is a process problem. The process is too slow or convoluted, or just generally ineffective, that getting to the point of launch can feel impossible.
Okay. Yep, I'm hearing you. So, big major blocker problem number 1, just clunky, cumbersome processes.
That's exactly right. So, that has to do, think of like, okay, so I'm going to talk about like the demo scenario that I set up for the webinar, and hopefully
Okay,
this
let's
is
get into it.
relatable to everybody. So
Yeah.
basically, in the webinar I was doing, I was pretending, I was like showing off this beautiful tentpole event page I was working on, which, event marketers, they might have their crown jewel that they're working on, right? Showing it
Mhm.
off. And then I get an email from Camille with a
Mhm.
very aggressive subject line: urgent, action required. I have an event I want to launch. Hey, Zach, we're so close to our OpGen goal. If we do one more webinar, we'll probably get to 100%. Can you help
Mhm.
me set this up? And I pull up an email template, which goes, sorry, Camille, I'm underwater with this event. Here are the instructions for setting up this event yourself if you want to do this. And it's like, okay, first, talk to the design team. They need to design an event page for you. Then they need to code it in our CMS, and they need to embed a
Mhm.
Marketo form. So pull in, Chris from marketing operations.
Right.
Talk to Emily for the tracking. She'll give you the tracking pixel. She'll give you the tracking link. She'll give you the UTM parameters.
Mhm.
Talk to Kelly from RevOps for your Salesforce campaign. You're going to need to manually export this for her once a week. Make sure you're sending these updates to the team on Slack. There's just a million steps, and there's a million
Yeah.
like little at tags in there. And if I
Mhm.
actually sent that email to you, you would kill me. You would hate me, because that would basically be 40 hours worth of work just on internal coordination, not even thinking about the experience, right?
Right.
So not to make this about Splash, but this, if you do have a technology that allows you to do everything yourself in a single tool, because as events people, we are
Mhm.
doers. We don't want to wait on people to create us a Zoom link because they're the technology owner. We just want to get stuff done. If you do
Right.
that, you can crush that 40 hours, get back into your regular job, get an event launched, and actually crush your goal. Because, like we said with that stat, you see the light at the end of the tunnel. The worst thing would be being paralyzed by a process and not being able to do it.
That is so real. As an event marketer, one of my number one goals, one of the things I need to be successful in my role is that self sufficiency. I literally cannot afford to wait for design to make a tweak to my landing page for me because, one speaker dropped out and I got another speaker instead, right? Or, you know, to your point, the tracking, right? Do I have everything set up on the back end properly? Like, I don't have time to wait for my marketing ops person or my digital marketer counterpart to make sure I have that all set up for every single event. It's just not scalable. So I I can very much relate to the need to simplify your processes through an event technology provider that actually allows you to do that. Um, and you mentioned so many people just now in this one scenario, right? Of like the burden that it becomes not just on you as the event marketer, but on the rest of your team. You can't
Exactly.
necessarily just make a decision in a silo. Hey, we are 5% away from our opgen goal from events, so we need to run one more event to hit our goal, because that, to your what you're communicating and conveying, is like the real work and the real hours that would be required from the rest of your team to support that additional event.
Yeah,
Um,
it's terrible. It's just like a huge like cultural drain too.
yeah.
You have like to rely on people for tedious work, right? Like just the act of sending an email, for example, which for some marketers, event marketers, is really hard. It's like, do I want to bug my operations person who's like thinking about strategy and optimization to like set up an email and help me test it and change a period to a semicolon? Do I
Mhm.
want to take somebody from our digital team out of what they're doing so they can set me up a tracking link or a UTM parameter? It's
Yeah.
like they're hired to take on big challenges, do this strategic work, and bogging them down with like little manual things, it has a cumulative effect, which I will talk about a little bit more later.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So just tying up this bow on really kind of the answer to our first question, which is like, what's stopping businesses from doing more events? Is that when you're trying to do them the right way, right? They can be
Hmm.
challenging if you don't have the right tools in place
I
and
would
the right
say
strategy, I would argue.
yes. I would say simplify. I have four problems. I think
Okay.
simplified problems, in my opinion, are the number one problem that we hear about when we talk to other event marketers. Process
Mhm.
problems. Um, yeah.
What's the second big bucket or category of problems?
Okay. So these all, I think, start to blend together, but I've also been inspired by a few other stats that I've come across. So
Okay.
this one came from Forrester, which said 27 total interactions during the purchasing process today for modern B2B buying process, up
Yep.
from 17 in 2019. So that's a 60% increase in the number of interactions. And then tying that,
Huge.
like really punctuating it, this one comes from McKinsey. 72% say they'll actively look for another supplier if there isn't a consistent brand experience
Mm,
across channels. So, what this is telling me is if you're not nailing your brand at every single attendee interaction, you are actively eroding the trust of your target audience. We think of just the event page, which is important. That's the crown jewel of any event, right? But it's everything. It's emails, it's
yeah.
registration, it's confirmation, social, joining virtually, post event, your public facing events calendar. You can get to those 27 interactions with events alone. So there's a
Right.
huge opportunity there if you do it right, but also a risk if you're flubbing those touch points. So the problem that we hear so often is it's next to impossible to create eye-catching on-brand events and digital experiences on my own. So it's often a
Mm,
branding problem,
mhm.
and it could be said because a lot of businesses have beautiful websites, and then you land on their event page, and it's like a form
Such a
from
disconnect. Yeah.
Geocities in 1998, and it's like this is inconsistent. This is
Yeah.
jarring for the person who's been hyped about your brand and now wants to experience it more intimately at an event.
Yeah. And I think I'm so glad you're talking about this. I feel like we're kind of getting into, you're right. It does come together and it's all connected, right? Because I feel like what we're kind of articulating here is some of that untapped potential that you're missing out on when you can't solve the problem of doing more events, or the challenge of, right, of doing more events. You're missing out on the opportunity to engage with your buyers or customers and hit that 27, touch point, kind of goal or benchmark that is now expected, right, of buyers, B2B
Hmm.
buyers in particular. And you're missing out on, or, you're risking, like you said, that brand dilution, which, even if you are getting and hitting those 27 touch points, if they're not consistently on brand, you're still at risk, and you're still, kind of going to be facing a pretty big challenge of getting folks to convert to being a buyer.
Yeah, I love that term, brand dilution. And the opposite of that, if you is diluting your brand, so huge risk if you're messing up in those touch points. The opposite is amplifying your brand. So imagine
Right.
flipping it. Imagine if your entire attendee journey was modern, exciting, on brand. Imagine if every event you created built trust with audience and differentiated you from your competitors. And then imagine if you could replicate that over and over again. The 27 stat really jumped out to me.
Mm-hmm.
It goes back to something I learned when I first started at Splash almost 10 years ago from our founder, Ben, who was teaching me about like the game changing impact of events, saying like it's so high risk or so high stakes because you have the command of your audience in a room. and
Right.
no other marketing channel has that. So if you do an amazing job, the impact can be transformative because you'll never command someone's attention like that with a digital ad or a commercial, right? But also, if
Right.
something goes wrong, if you didn't plan for it, it can backfire, and now you just embarrassed yourself in front of a group of people you were trying to impress. So now, with this 27 stat and the maturity of the internet and people doing research, there are substantial opportunities to dilute your brand, which would be really bad. But then, if you're doing it well, your events can be amplifying your brand by getting people excited and teaching them at every touch point in your attendee life cycle.
I love it. I love it. Okay, so what's the third big pain point or challenge?
Third, okay, I'll hit you with another stat. So
I'm ready.
75%, this comes from Forrester again, rate seamlessly collecting data about attendees' explicit implied interests as essential or very important. And this makes sense. I'm actually surprised it's not a little harder,
Mm.
especially as we're moving towards a cookieless future,
Mm.
2024, right around the corner.
Mhm. Mhm.
The best way to learn about your audience is first party data, and events do
Reach.
this really well.
Yep.
So the problem is, again, same way like branding lags behind for events. I think for event marketers also their measurement ability lags behind.
Mhm.
So the problem, to summarize it, would be not having sophisticated or reliable way to integrate event data into your business systems.
Right.
So this might mean things like you're not generating insights because your event data is like in spreadsheets on your intern's computer
Mhm.
or a disconnected system. This might
Mhm.
mean you don't have a way of using data to inform your strategy. And
Mm.
it probably means, this is a scary one, it would chill your
Yes.
bones to the marrow if an exec asked you, "Hey, Camille, what was the ROI of your program? I need it to determine if we should do it again next year." Right?
Yep.
If you have a measurement problem, that would be a really scary question.
Yes. Yes, yes, yes. And I will say earlier in my career, I have been in that position and it is not fun. So speaking from experience, I can say, being able to confidently report on the impact and results of your events, it's an unmatched feeling. And it not only does it allow me as an event marketer to make those informed data driven recommendations and proposals. It allows my key stakeholders like our CMO, our CEO, our CFO, who have to sign off on my budget, and proposals. It gives them the data and information they need also to say, yes, Camille, love this plan and strategy, green light. Or dig in and ask those questions about like where and how we should be investing our resources, our time, our budget, our manpower, or people power rather.
Yeah.
uh,
The
so
integration element of this is also really important because there's measuring your results and being able to prove impact to get better investments and to inform strategy. There's also, the success of our programs as marketers is often reliant on sales' ability to help you amplify them.
woo, talk about it.
Following up with people before the event to drive attendance, following up with people who attended afterwards so that you can capitalize on the momentum, right? And if
Yep.
your event data isn't flowing into your business systems, Slack or let's say Salesforce, one, you have an inefficient sales cycle or event marketing cycle because they're waiting to take action. And
Mm-hmm.
two, going back to the stats we mentioned earlier about 40 hours or more for one event, Camille, I'm sure you don't want to spend your day answering one off Slack messages from people
No.
saying, was this person invited? Did they register yet? Did they show up? Did they get the
Right.
on demand recording? If that information is in Slack or in Salesforce and they can just go view it, you don't
Or
have to
both.
deal with any of that. We're both, yeah, you don't have to deal with that. So saves you
Yep.
time, but also saves them time and being timely with their follow-ups.
I think this is so key, Zach. I think it kind of touches on what you mentioned with just the mission to democratize events. It's not just and going back to what I was talking about with the need and the importance of self-serve, right? It's not just for the benefit of the event marketer or the event team, right? It's going to benefit your entire revenue organization. It's going to benefit your salespeople, your customer experience or customer success folks, and that is being able to kind of optimize your marketing sales playbook or SLA, which shameless plug, by the way, we're going to be dropping some free resources to help you create an SLA or create that marketing and sales playbook if you don't have one in place or if you need to refresh the one that you have in place. So join our community.
Ooh,
We'll make sure that the link is in the show notes for this episode. Join the community because we're going to start releasing free resources and content and templates like that to help you just level up even just 1% every day. But going back to what I was saying, it's really about, like you said, Zach, empowering your sales people to help you extract more value from your events. And not only is it going to help you as an event marketer hit your goals, your sales folks are going to be absolutely jazzed because they're going to be, more enabled to hit their quota, to hit their team goals, and to drive, real revenue impact. So, um,
well said.
the yeah, the measuring your results and also like what you were talking about, the integration aspect of, our Splash and Slack integration is so helpful. But it's also very helpful because obviously we're leveraging that integration with Marketo and Salesforce. And so kind of going back to our third question or third big point of what we wanted to cover today is, the right tech stack, the right event tech stack is going to offer real solutions to these big pain points that we're talking about. So,
Absolutely.
Zach, what's the fourth big one? The fourth big pain point or challenge that you see holding marketers back from doing more events?
Yeah. So the fourth one, I would say, is a culmination of the first three. So the first three, again, are process problems,
Mm-hmm.
brand problems, and measurement problems. So I'm going to bring it full circle to the stat that we started with, which again was 81% of event practitioners would hold more events if they had technology that make them easier to replicate. And what I think this becomes for businesses is the worst kind of business problem, which is a growth problem. The
Say more
inability,
there.
yeah, the inability to, there's a couple flavors to a growth problem, either extract more impact out of the events that you're currently doing.
Mm-hmm.
That's usually for the smaller size teams, or the ability to get technology into the hands of more people so that you can expand the scope of your program. That latter requires very rigorous consistency and branding and compliance standards, which is very difficult to pull off if you don't have technology that supports that. But I'll just give you an example
Yeah.
of how this sometimes works. So, in terms of like what a growth problem sometimes sounds like, sometimes it sounds fairly harmless. It's like we do the same time consuming steps every time we need to launch an event. Again, doesn't
Mm-hmm.
sound terrible, very relatable. But
Right.
if you think about it, it shows how all the little things that waste time and make the process painful actually hurt your bottom line. So if you're doing check-in by hand, if you're retroactively updating data in your CRM, if you're coding landing pages by hand, if ops is involved in every email you send, if you're waiting on your website admin, if you're answering the one-off Slacks, list goes on. All of that adds up, and all of it inhibits programs from reaching their full potential. So
Mm-hmm.
that to me is very, very silly. Like we make those types of excuses, like this is temporarily painful, but they really add up and they prevent brands from doing more events, which is terrible because for most, events are their most effective marketing channel.
That's really I will I will tell on myself here a little bit because I'm sure there's some other marketers tuned in that can relate. I think, prior to obviously me joining Splash and having all of the resources and the support that I have here now in this role, I can relate to the feeling of that, like, that feeling when you tense up when someone's like, "Hey, can we throw another event next month
Mm.
or in a couple of weeks or next quarter?" And you're like, "No, I can't add anything else to my plate. I'm up to my eyeballs. I'm at capacity." And you just know how much work could go into that, right? Again, if you don't have the ability to simplify your processes and have that the right tools in place that allow you to do that, um, that's a very relatable scenario. I've been there. And the thing is, in today's landscape, I think, um, we can't really afford to just say no because it's hard, right? And so we have to look for ways to make the process easier, more streamlined, still getting the results that we're looking for, right? Not diluting the brand experience like we're talking about, right? Don't throw
Hmm.
more events and have them be off brand or not aligned to your company strategy or objectives. uh, you know, you can't just do more events just for the sake of it, right? You still have to, like, be thoughtful about, like, what are the goals of your events? What are you expecting to see? In addition to, like I said, finding those pockets of um, opportunities for efficiency gains. Uh, so we've talked about the four major problems, and we've been sprinkling in, the what is the untapped potential, right? Like, and or what's the upside of being able to solve some of these problems. And we've talked
Yeah.
about the role that event technology can play in your kind of um, approach to solving these problems. So, Zach, is there anything else that you would add in terms of, how do we what's the parting advice for our listeners today as we kind of wrap up this discussion? We've, like I said, we've talked about the four major problems. We've kind of talked about some upsides and solutions. What else would you add in terms of empowering people to really just, like, stealing the name of your webinar, build events at record speed? Because I think if we can do that for our listeners, we're going to be putting them in a really, really strong position to win big this quarter and this year. Anything else that you would add?
Yeah. So, um, my advice is not to make any technology recommendations or anything like that. What I would say is, if you're listening and you're an event marketer, like we said at the beginning, you are probably a doer. You get things done, and you don't ever want to be the bottleneck or be victim to bottlenecks.
Right.
So, if you are encountering some of these problems that we said, process problems, brand problems, measurement problems, growth problems, hopefully now you have a framework for how to describe them and to advocate for a tool where you could say, I want to be able to do everything myself. I want to give my
Mm-hmm.
team time back, and I want to drive success and grow my business. So that's my recommendation, is to use some of this language and maybe some of these stats and advocate for
Yeah.
yourself to be able
Mm.
to get events done at record speed, or extract more value from your events, or grow your program and do more events the way that you may have set out to at the beginning of the year.
I love that. I think that's sound advice. We have to be able to advocate for ourselves and our needs, right? as if you are owning your event strategy or your certain event programs, you are, our CMO always uses this phrase, you are the canary in the coal mine, right? You are going to have a different perspective. You are going to be able to articulate what the blockers to your success are in a way that other people won't be able to. So if you're not already doing this, like Zach said, advocating for what you need to be more successful, hopefully this episode was helpful and some of these stats can aid you in that quest. One final thing I would add is again a little bit of a shameless plug, but really a call to action, is that if you are faced with any of these challenges or pain points, you can relate to anything that we talked about today, join our community, because it's a great um, digital space for you to continue to dig into some of these questions, get feedback, ask other event marketers how they are maybe advocating for themselves, and able to, take the steps in the right direction to towards solving these major pain points that are felt by so many people. I mean, I think the numbers of the stats, kind of tell us that, right? And so if you're feeling this way, if you can relate, as I always say, you're not alone. And we've got a great community of people like me and like you, and like Zach and other marketing rock stars and events rock stars that are really just kind of really keen to support each other, and work through these challenges together. So that would be my parting advice for our listeners today. This has been a great episode, Zach. Thank you for hopping in with me and kind of distilling down what you shared in the webinar. These were just such a helpful breakdown, I think, that I really couldn't pass up the opportunity to get these gems from you and share them more broadly in our podcast show. So to our listeners today, I want to say thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, as always, go ahead and subscribe to this show on your preferred podcast platform so you never miss an episode. We drop new content for this show pretty much weekly. And I'm really excited for the future topics we'll be digging into. One final plug, related to future podcast shows and topics. If there's anything that we haven't covered yet or that you want us to cover in greater depth, go ahead and let us know. You can email us at podcast@splashthat.com, or better yet, join our community. Let us know there. And we will be back very soon, probably next week, with another episode. Until next time, thank you so much and take care.